And the essence of the work that my colleagues and I have been doing really over the last 25, 30 years is exploring these differences between children in how they react to and respond to, in terms of their health and their development, these kinds of experiences of toxic stress and adversity.
How on earth do you study that?
Well, we pondered that a long time before we figured out how to do that. We bring children into laboratory circumstances. We sit them down in front of a previously unknown examiner, and that examiner asks them to do a series of mildly but definitively stressful tasks for young kids. So these might be things like repeating back a series of digits that the examiner says to the child, or having the child watch an emotion-evoking video clip of some kind.
What, like?
Oh.
That's like a film?
Yeah, like a film. Like a children's film.
Like when Ferdinand the bull, his dad gets taken away, and I see my little daughter's face. She walks away.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, they're very evocative for kids. But we also do things like putting a drop of lemon juice on the tongue. So it's not all just emotion and, cognition. It's also physical things as well. So we do that in a very standardized, predictable way. It's almost scripted with each child. And as we're doing that, we're measuring the peripheral changes that are manifestations of the two principal stress response systems in the human brain. One is the cortisol system, which produces the stress hormone cortisol, which, as you know, has these powerful effects on the immune system and the cardiovascular system. And the other is the fight or flight system, the so-called autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for the sweaty palms and tremulousness and high heart rate that we get when we're under pressure or stress of one kind or another.
Is that adrenal, or am I simplifying it?
It is adrenal. It's the gland that sits on top of the kidney and puts out cortisol, but it also puts out these other stress hormones that increase your heart rate, change your immune system, make your palms sweaty and your eyes dilated.
With the biological assumption being that these kind of stressful stimuli require response, a heightened response, and these are the biochemical responses that facilitate that.
Exactly. And children vastly differ in their responsivity within those two systems.
What did you observe? What's the main thing you observed?
Well, we by doing this, we get this measure of children's reactivity to stress in the laboratory. We can then take that measure and we can move it out into the real world, to the natural world that the child experiences and observes, where there's an abundance of adversity and stress that every child experiences as well. So we can use this very standardized laboratory measure of reactivity to stress and see how that changes children's health and developmental consequences when they're exposed to naturally occurring stressors. Things like parents getting a divorce, or lots of marital conflict, or the parent having a mental disorder of one kind or another. And we find that, most of the children have pretty modest responses in the laboratory to those challenges that we put them to. And those kids, as you might expect, when they're in the real world and they're experiencing naturally occurring either safety or stress, they have about the same health and developmental outcomes, irrespective of the kinds of experiences that they're having in the real world. But by contrast to that the kids that we call Orchid children are the high reactivity kids who seem to have either the best outcomes or the worst outcomes, depending upon the kind of social context that they're being reared in. So the Orchid children who are being reared in stressful, traumatic environments, they have far and away the worst outcomes of any of the kids that we study. But the kids who are also orchid children, but who are living in protected, loving, caring family and community environments, they don't just have medium levels of outcome. They're the healthiest of all the children in our studies. So they have either the worst or the best outcomes, depending upon social context.
Orchid children can be understood to be highly sensitive, and so sensitivity can either lead to sort of strong trauma response and mental deterioration, or excellence then.
Yeah, exactly. You can think of it as permeability, as having thin skin. And what gets in through that skin is either the bad stuff or the good stuff that a child experiences.
How long in your case studies, do you track individuals or groups?
Well, for the book, we did one chapter that was where we looked back at the kids that we had studied in preschool like 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And we had a great research assistant who was able to track down these kids, and we had 4 kids who were orchid children and 4 kids who were dandelion children from low stress and high stress settings back then. So we had kind of exemplary cases, eight kids that we had information on over 3 decades of their lives.
And here's my assumptions that the high-stress orchid kids are drug addicts and in prison.
No, they're not that bad.
No.
But they are kids who are more involved in kind of marginal social behavior. There was one that has developed trouble with alcoholism. There's another that has, despite being now in his mid-30s, just hasn't quite found his way. He's kind of continued to be lost. Whereas the kids who were back then, 30 years ago, orchid children in the lab, who were being brought up in families that really cared for them and nurtured them in a variety of ways, those kids are just doing phenomenally. One's an actor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I forget what the other one was, but...
Yeah, to hell with that non-famous orchid. Thanks for watching this podcast and going all the way to the end of it. Would you so kind as to click the bell? It might not be there, could be over there. And subscribing so that we can infiltrate your serenity and peace of mind with jangling bells and buzzes. Thank you.